Okay, in this video, we are going to look at the process known as oogenesis, and that's the process of the production of the secondary oocyte or the female gamete. Right. This process takes place in the ovaries, and that's the female reproductive organs. And unlike spermatogenesis, this process begins in the female ovaries before they are born. So here you see the process of oogenesis, and also here on the right side, that's oogenesis in the ovaries. So when we describe this process, we have to mention what happened to those cells before birth, after birth, and when the girl reached puberty. Okay, so to do that, let's go into each stage. Okay, one by one. Okay, first we mentioned about the primordial germ cells, and that is 2N. Okay, what happened is that it will undergo mitosis many times, and hence forming this oogonium. Since this is mitosis, so that means oogonium is also 2N. Okay, oogonium continues to develop, and so development, and it will develop into another cells which we call it as the primary oocytes. Okay, this primary oocytes is encapsulated. Maksudnya dia adalah diselaputi, encapsulated with one or more layers of the follicular cells. So you get to see a lot of these follicular cells. So the growth of this follicle is stimulated by hormones. So from the name follicle, so the hormones that is responsible to stimulate the development or the growth is follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so this primary oocyte will then undergo meiosis. But then the process is incomplete and it's going to stop at prophase 1. And this happens during fetal development. Okay, fetal development. So that means this primary oocytes is still diploid since the process of meiosis, even meiosis 1, is incomplete. Okay, moving on is that you can see here at birth, the baby girl has got already millions of these primary oocytes. But then these primary oocytes are still in dormant phase, which is in prophase 1. Just now they stop at prophase 1, meiosis 1. And this number of oocytes will decrease at puberty. Okay, at puberty it will decrease. So that means every female, okay, they are born with many of these primary oocytes, which stays dormant at prophase 1, and until they reach puberty, there will be another different stages now. Okay, upon reaching puberty, what happened to the primary oocyte? Okay, just now they stop at meiosis 1, prophase 1, right? So upon reaching puberty, so that means that each month, when the girl has reached this stage of puberty, there will be menstrual cycle. So each month, we say ovulation happens, right? Okay, so this primary oocyte will continue meiosis 1, okay, to form secondary oocyte and the first polar body. Okay, so look at this. So this is what happened. This is primary oocytes, okay, with the encapsulating primary follicles. And you see this, upon reaching puberty, this primary oocytes is one of the primary oocytes with the follicles will mature and undergo meiosis 1. Okay, so as we trace down, you can see these from here, primary oocytes is going to result into 2. The first polar body, which is haploid, now it is already haploid from 2N. And also another product is secondary oocytes, which is also N. Okay, look here that this first polar body is going to complete meiosis 2. Completing meiosis 2, forming another 2 of the second polar body, which is definitely haploid. Okay, but look at this, because secondary oocytes is the significant ones. Eventually, the polar bodies will disintegrate and die lah. Okay. So let's look at this. Secondary oocyte will begin meiosis 2, which is then halted. Okay, look at these terms. That means stopped. At metaphase 2, and the first polar body just now already mentioned that the process of meiosis complete. But this one, secondary oocyte, able to begin meiosis 2, but then stopped at metaphase 2. Alright, metaphase 2. Metaphase 2. Stopped. Okay, so next, do not forget to mention also the layer of follicular cells. Okay, with primary oocytes encapsulated by primary follicle. Secondary oocytes encapsulated by secondary follicle as they developed. Okay, that the names changed because the structure is no longer the same lah after development. Okay, we get to see that it is now called the secondary follicle. Okay, the secondary follicle continues to develop, and then there's another term that we use. Now we call it as the Graphene Follicle. So you can see here, as it continues to develop, it becomes the Graphene Follicle. So you can see here on the right side, this picture of the ovary. You see the primary follicle, and then secondary follicle, and you see that this now is being called Graphene Follicle, which within it has got this secondary oocyte. So now as it progresses, you get to see secondary oocyte is released out of the ovary. Okay, let's continue. It says here, a mature Graphene follicle will approach the surface of the ovary, so as depicted here in the picture, and it's going to release the secondary oocyte into the fallopian tube. And this process is known as ovulation. Okay. Alright, bear this in your mind. But before that, just now I didn't mention, the significance of Graphene follicle is that it's the structure that is responsible to release estrogen. Okay? During ovulation, you see the level of estrogen is increasing. Okay, because of this structure, the Graphene follicle releasing it. Okay. Alright, so you can see here, this is what happened during ovulation. Okay, next, what happened to the secondary oocytes just now, that their process of meiosis 2 stops at metaphase 2. So next is that, okay, the secondary oocyte, okay, bracket, it says immature ovum. That means this secondary oocyte that is in the fallopian tube is still called the immature ovum. It will not complete meiosis 2 unless there is fertilization. That means if there is sperm that penetrates the secondary oocyte, which is immature, then only meiosis 2 will be completed from metaphase 2 just now. Okay, from here. Then only it produces ovum, which is the matured one. Okay, this is the female gamete, which is haploid, and a polar body. Okay, so look at this. Okay, so sperm is shown here, meaning if sperm is present, fertilization happens, that the nucleus of the sperm is going to fuse with the nucleus of the ovum here, the immature ovum secondary oocyte is now, to form mature ovum and a polar body. Okay, so this polar body is not significant. What's significant here is the ovum. Okay, next, we said fertilization takes place. So, nucleus, sperm's nucleus, ovum's nucleus fused, and the product is a diploid zygote. Okay, fusion of two haploid results in a diploid zygote. And the rest of the polar bodies will die and disintegrated by the ovary. Okay, so here after ovulation, okay, this is it, refer to the ovary. Right here, after ovulation, what happened is the remaining follicles, just now we have the primary follicle, secondary follicle, and then we have the graphene follicle. Now the remaining follicle has got another name here, corpus luteum. Okay, corpus luteum is significant. Why? Because upon fertilization, this will continue to grow, this structure, this corpus luteum. Why? Because it is responsible to secrete estrogen, to make sure that the level of estrogen is high, as well as progesterone. Okay, because this ensures the thickening of the walls of the endometrium. All right, but if there is no fertilization, what happened to this structure, the corpus luteum and the secondary oocyte? Okay, this one. What happened to them is that they will degenerate, they will die, and therefore they will be removed through menstruation. Okay, that's the process of oogenesis, which happens in the ovaries of a female.